Welcome to Moses Lake Lead Community Initiatives Update. My name is Carolyn Bass with the Columbia Basin Herald, and I'm a founding member of Moses Lake Lead Board, and I will be your host today. I'm joined today with Harold Croce, resource conservationist with the Watershed Council, and Allison Williams, city manager for the city of Moses Lake. Prior to the pandemic, Moses Lake Lead conducted a community survey, and from that survey, we identified 11 topics that were consistently mentioned as things that the community didn't like about Moses Lake and/or that they would like to see changed. We had planned to hold a community summit to discuss these issues and the results of the survey. However, the pandemic hit and our summit had to be postponed. And then our next attempt was also postponed due to the rise in cases taking place now. We want to provide an update to our community on these topics as many things are happening and moving forward. So this video update series was created. I'm happy to share one of the multiple video updates today focuses on the quality of our lake water. Our community is built around a beautiful 18-mile lake with 3 main arms and approximately 120 miles of shoreline. Our lake is a big draw for locals as well as visitors, which makes it an important economic driver in our community. In fact, a baseline assessment of the economic and social values of Moses Lake was conducted by Harold's team and colleagues and suggests the overall health and success of the lake is important to a variety of stakeholders, including local and regional business leaders, property owners, Moses Lake residents, and tourists. Survey results demonstrate how important the lake is to our residents and the surrounding region. In fact, over 93% of the respondents strongly agree that it is important to the community for Moses Lake to be safe and usable for recreation. 57% of the respondents say that the lake is a primary reason that they choose to live in Moses Lake. In our Moses Lake Lead survey, when we asked what you would change, the collective response was create a metro area sewer and water district, including MLIRD, the city of Moses Lake, and the port of Moses Lake and Grant County. So while I'm not sure exactly what the respondents to the survey had in mind, or if this was a result of the timing of the survey, as it is when there was a breach and the sewage spill into the lake by the fill area. But we will jump in with some questions and responses from our panelists to start the conversation. We welcome those of you watching to provide positive feedback in the comments. So let's get to some questions. But before we start, I'm thinking it might be nice to provide some context, perhaps a brief history of the lake, how we got to this point in time, meaning why do we have a problem with algae? Harold?
Thank you, Carolyn. It's good to be with you today and with Allison to discuss this very important topic with the community. And there is quite a history behind Moses Lake. We didn't just start studying the lake 4 years ago when the Watershed Council started. It started quite some time ago. So just kind of give you a brief idea of what we're working with here. When we talk about the Moses Lake watershed, we're talking about an area that encompasses approximately 2,450 square miles. It's a very large watershed. All of that has a potential of depositing sediments, runoff water, and other things into the lake that are contributing factors. But Moses Lake was formed many years ago by drifting sand damming Crab Creek. So it wasn't always a natural lake. It was a function of geologic erosion, which was the sediments that were blowing in that created the lake. The lake had no surface outlet until 1904, when floodwaters scoured a channel and lowered the lake level by 8 to 10 feet. A dam constructed in 1909 failed and was not rebuilt until 1929. When the Moses Lake Irrigation District first constructed that dam and its outlet works, restoring the lake to its earlier elevation of 1,046 feet above sea level. A second outflow works was constructed by the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation in 1963. Outlet structures control lake level between 1,041 feet and 1,048 feet. Lake level is currently maintained at about 1,046 feet through the cooperative efforts of the Irrigation District and the Bureau of Reclamation. So when I talk about the history, we need to understand that studies have been done on this lake for approximately 30 years, led primarily by the University of Washington Civil Engineering Department, who were contracted by the irrigation district to begin studies on the lake to determine what the sources of the algae blooms were, how to monitor them over time, and how to begin thinking about mitigation strategies to clean the lake up over time. So it isn't, like I said earlier, as though this study started right now. It's been going on for quite some time. But until we recently formed the Moses Lake Watershed Council, it was being really directed by several different entities that came in periodically, did a study, published their data, and moved on. There was never a coherent, cohesive plan to manage the lake over time, meaning there was never an entity or body dedicated solely to studying the lake, bringing all the data up to date that had been stored for 30 years, assimilating that data, and putting into a path forward. And so that's kind of where we stand today with the lake.
Great. And so for the benefit of our viewers, can you share what the role of the Watershed Council is and who sits on the council?
Yes, that's an important part of this as well. It's kind of an interesting history there as well. The Watershed Council was formed as a result of a meeting that was put together by Senator Warnick and Representative Dent approximately 4 years ago. And they called that meeting for a specific purpose, to assemble the primary stakeholders to begin to plot a more cohesive plan forward. At that meeting, the stakeholders, the city was there represented, the Grant County Health District was at that meeting, the Department of Ecology and Grant County Conservation District, and the Moses Lake Irrigation and Reclamation District were the people sitting around the table at that meeting discussing, how do we move forward and bring all these stakeholders together to develop a plan and a strategy for cleaning up the lake. Out of that meeting was a subsequent meeting that was led by the Conservation District, where we brought those same stakeholders together in another meeting. And at that meeting, it was determined, based on Conservation District's background in watershed planning and watershed studies, that we thought starting a watershed program with this lake is the starting point and how we move forward. And so that's where the Moses Lake Watershed Council name started. And that's how we began assembling the people that would actually be part of the Watershed Council as we move forward. Again, like I mentioned, the city of Moses Lake is very well represented. Allison attends some of the meetings. Councilmen attend the meeting. The city Public Works Department is part of that. And Councilman Riggs has been there from the very beginning, has been a stalwart supporter of this project, and we very much appreciate that. The Grant County Health District was there from the beginning as we stood up the council. Department of Ecology, Grant County Conservation District, Washington State Fish and Wildlife, the Bureau of Reclamation, some citizen groups who have attended periodically to the meeting, but that's really the core group, is what I mentioned there. And that was for the sole purpose of plotting a path forward and how we would handle the problem of the lake. The Grant County Conservation District decided and was determined to be the lead, meaning only that we would chair the meetings, and that's my role from then until now as the chair of the Watershed Council. The other thing was to seek grants and money, knowing that it would take resources as we move forward with this to close some of the data gaps that we know exist, that we need to plot a path forward. And so again, the money piece of it is a big part, but also kind of a focus point for the community where they could come and ask questions, and also that we could begin to feed information back into the community on a consistent basis to kind of keep them engaged and involved in the project, and have some understanding that we are working on this, that it isn't just we just didn't start and go away. This has been a very concerted ongoing effort by the council. And so communication, education, public meetings, we started a web page where people can to go to one spot to get current information. And so the role of the council is basically to be the lead for this entire project moving forward.
Great. So I'd like to touch on the economic impact of the lake. Anything to add to what I mentioned earlier in regard to the lake economic impact survey?
No, I think you covered it fairly well on the economics. You know, we hired a firm, professionals to come in and complete that survey. And they did an excellent job of kind of capturing the mood of the community, you know, to engage the community. And we were very encouraged by the amount of people that actually responded. Well over 1,000 people responded to that survey. So, and they came from a cross section of the community. So, you know, we felt fairly comfortable that with that report, we got a pretty good gauge and sense of the primary thing we're looking for. Is the community going to get behind this project? What level of understanding do they have of the status of the lake right now? What are their primary concerns moving forward with this lake? And we were kind of mildly surprised at the amount of people from outside the city that actually responded to this survey, letting us know that although they live in Seattle, they have a vested interest in the lake to come over here for recreation and fishing, and a place they could go to that was 300 and some odd days of sunshine, you know, a good climate and a good community to come to. And so that all came out of that survey, giving us, you know, somewhat of a path forward, but also encouraging us to move forward, knowing that we have the backing of the community.
Great. Allison, anything to add to that?
Well, I think the city has been an engaged partner. The city annexed into the conservation district last year to ensure that there was a base of funding for this effort. And in my history in public service, when there are issues like the issues surrounding the lake, it takes a multi-pronged approach in order to provide a solution. And so the group that has been put together through the Watershed Council has all of the interested parties at the table, and each party has a role to fill. So you know, our hats are off to the Conservation District and the Watershed Council for really putting together this collaborative effort and then getting the resources in place to do the planning. The city since has conducted community outreach in regards to our overall comprehensive plan. We've conducted community outreach in regards to downtown planning and creative district planning. We've done community outreach planning in regards to our parks and recreation comprehensive plan. The consistent theme amongst all of these pieces of input is the importance of the lake to this community. And so its health is paramount. And it is paramount to our economy. So we're really pleased with the efforts that are now underway.
Great, thanks. So let's talk a little bit about the health of the lake water. A couple of months ago, our newspaper reported that the lake was the cleanest it's been in decades. Harold, could you give us an update on the good work that the Watershed Council and others are doing, and or what plans that there are to do continued to address the lake water health and specifically the algae bloom?
Yeah, Carolyn, for sure. You know, this gets down to the crux of the issue. You know, really get a clear understanding of what the problem is with the lake. So, you know, if we talk about why do we have a problem? Nitrogen and phosphorus are the major nutrients causing over-fertilization of Moses Lake. The principal sources of enrichment to the lake include irrigation return, principal surface water streams and groundwater, municipal sewage, effluent, and that's been mostly taken care of, you know, with the treatment plant. So when I talk about municipal sewage, now I'm talking about really about septic tanks and leachate. And we also get some recycling from the bottom sediments on the lake as well. So it's an interchange of the nutrients and how much is coming in and how much legacy load is there, what disturbs those sediments at the bottom of the lake that bring the nutrients back into the water column. And those nutrients are the engine or the energy that feeds the cyanobacteria, primarily phosphorus. And so that's kind of the issue, is trying to get a handle on the nutrient load in the lake as it stands right now. And we've got to fill some data gaps, which I mentioned earlier. We have come to find out through some work by the USGS and Bureau of Reclamation, Department of Ecology, partially funded by the Conservation District, to determine what those source loads are. And we found that there's quite a bit of, up to about 30% of the load that exists now comes from groundwater. It's moving, and I'm talking about shallow groundwater that finds its way to the lake. So as the water table in the region rises and lowers with fluctuations brought on by the irrigation water that comes in the Columbia Basin, that brings with it a little bit of groundwater load that carries about 30% of the phosphorus we think that's happening in the lake today. We're beginning to get a handle on where that's coming from and what points in the lake we need to concentrate on the future to solve that problem. So we're looking at 2 or 3 different strategies right now. One is we have to come up with a lake balance or a modeling plan for the lake. How much nutrients coming in, where the sources are coming in, and mitigation strategies for taking care of that. A big part of the solution has been Bureau of Reclamation water, where they use the lake as a feed route to the South District, basically through the potholes. This last year, we had such a good water quality, we believe, is because they basically tripled the amount of water that was coming through the lake. Over 33,000 acre feet of water, which basically turned the lake over a couple times. And we don't look at that as flushing the lake, we look at that as dilution. It's diluting that phosphorus out to a point that it's not really obtainable by the cyanobacteria, the plankton that causes that. So we're really, have to take our hats off to the Bureau of Reclamation for recognizing the problem we have, and hopefully they're integrating in that to their management strategy. And although we can't count on that solely into the future, we know that we've got their attention and they're taking us seriously and in their strategy on how to deliver water other places in the system.
Good. Can you share a little bit about the current and future work that you are doing and touch on the various grant resources? Clearly, the long-term fix for the lake water quality isn't cheap. So what funding is needed and what are some of the options for the funding?
I'm going to start off by recognizing the city again, and what Allison mentioned earlier, that the city stepped up and provided the Conservation District with some funding through rates and charges. We have used that money to seek other grants and use as match money for the grants we've gotten. We do have a cyanobacteria grant with the Department of Ecology in place right now, where we're basically studying the lakeshore. We're looking at some of the primary sources of the phosphorus near lake sources. And we're also looking at the Crab Creek corridor all the way to the Lincoln County line to get a kind of an understanding of what can be delivered to the lake from those sources as well. So the city stepped up and we're using that money, and it's an important part of what we do. We also just recently received a grant, Water Smart grant through the Bureau of Reclamation. It's a phase 1 grant, so we can begin studying the watershed in more detail. That million-acre watershed I was talking about earlier, we'll be able to study that in more detail. We'll be able to do a septic tank study in a lot more detail of where the septic tanks are, the condition of their drain fields, what has to be done helping them in the future to either get off of septic tanks or to keep their septic tanks up maintained and functioning properly. So we'll be looking at that as well. We'll also be working with USGS and the Department of Ecology on continuing that groundwater work that was done earlier. So that will continue. We're also exploring what we call promising technologies that might be coming along. One of those that's been around a while is the use of aluminum sulfate as a stripping agent and sealing agent for both the legacy load and the sediments, and stripping any phosphorus that might be coming in from the groundwater or other sources like Rocky Ford Creek and some of those. So that's happening. We've also set up a more complete monitoring program on the Rocky Ford Creek. This is a Bureau of Reclamation primarily, where we have monitors at the spring that feeds Rocky Ford Creek, and we also have a monitoring station now where it enters the lake. So we can begin to see if there's something more that we can do in there. The other thing that's going on the side that we haven't said a lot about is the Conservation District is working with the hatchery on a new plan to use composting facility for their mortality, and also run some water through there to trap any nutrients that might be there. We also just recently completed a large fencing project with a major landowner to fence off the lake from cattle entering the lake and what comes from that. So there are smaller efforts going on in the background concurrently, but I think in the future it's going to be a multifaceted approach, continuing monitoring, maybe some water treatment that'll have to happen in the future. But the overall plan is to bring the lake into natural balance to where we know that we've got a handle and have mitigated for any additional phosphorus coming to the lake. We've created aquatic vegetation around the lake. It's beneficial vegetation, and eventually wiping out the cyanobacteria to a level that it meets water quality standards for phosphorus in the future. I mean, that's a key point that we have to keep in mind. We've been given kind of a pass for now by the Department of Ecology to find local solutions to solve this problem. If we aren't successful, DOE's sitting in the wings ready to impose a TMDL. We don't want to go there. That would be expensive, it would be very intrusive, and it would be a regulatory approach. And so we know that we can handle this locally if we get, like I said, the community behind us, and we've been given this grace period to demonstrate that we have that support and the technical ability to solve this problem ourselves. And that's what we're shooting for.
Great. Allison, I know you and I have talked about stormwater runoff quite a bit and the effect that that has on the lake. Anything to add to Harold in terms of?
Absolutely. So while the Watershed Council is doing their work and their analysis, the city in our overall planning efforts has a huge role to play. So the city is manager of a sewer utility, a water utility, and a stormwater utility. And all of those plans need to be updated. And we have areas in our urban area where we don't have properties on sewer. We have gravel roads that contribute to the runoff to the lake. All of downtown does not have a stormwater facility. So all the runoff from storms contributes to deteriorating lake health. So we're in the process of getting all those plans up to date and moving forward with a capital plan that will result, and this is reflected in our citizens and the rates that they pay for water and sewer and stormwater. But the effect of getting properties on sewer and with effective stormwater plans and on city water is that we're minimizing the impact in the lake. And the other really important issue here is we have been ringing the bell in regards to the overall water supply and our concerns about the overall water supply. Through this partnership, what we have recognized is that we have a partnership that can be created with the Moses Lake Irrigation and Reclamation District. And again, that's another analysis of what can we be doing to supplement the use of potable water and instead replacing it with irrigation water, both with the irrigation district and the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation. So we now have our staff poised and our planning underway. And with the larger collaboration that's going on with the Watershed Council, I think we're making great progress. The final piece of that is how our private property owners treat their shoreline. And so the city also has a shoreline master program underway. And so how we plant the shoreline, treat the natural vegetation on the shoreline also contributes to lake health. And so I think we're taking a number of really important steps to ensure that this resource that is so important to the viability of our community, it will be with us for a long, long time, generations to come.
Great. So follow-up question for both of you. What still needs to happen? And can you explain the resources as well as the timelines associated with that? I know we've touched on it's not a short-term fix, et cetera, but you know, if anything, is there anything that the community and or volunteers can do to help as well? So Harold, you want to take it first and Allison follow up, or vice versa?
I can go ahead and talk to that a little bit here. And I'm gonna kind of tear off of what you said about community involvement. We're exploring a new program right now, and it's really run by there's a Watershed Coalition and a couple others. But what it does is it relies on what we call citizen scientists, and what we're planning on doing is engaging and training citizens on how to observe the lake, and maybe even get to the point of help with some analysis or helping with water sampling and some of those things. And so we're looking very, very seriously at creating this citizen scientist category to, you know, as much to bring them into the process and feel like part of the process, but also provide some people power that we don't have to maybe gather some data that we don't have enough human resources to go out and get. So that's one area that we're going to be exploring. But when you talk about what we need moving into the future, first we need to close the data gaps, and that'll happen in fairly short order. The next thing is to put together a lake management plan specific to the lake, and some of that will be derived from what we learned from the watershed, but a plan specific to the lake, which basically maps out the lake into sections of how different pieces of the lake need to be treated. We know that the Rocky Ford Arm, that section up through there is problematic because we can't get fresh Columbia River water far enough up into there to really solve that problem. And so how are we going to treat that section of the lake? And what Allison mentioned is also what is our lake shore going to look like in the future? You know, the idea of having lawns right down to the lake and those things are great, but maybe that isn't the best for the aquatics of the lake going into the future. So we're going to be putting together what we call technical fact sheets of a person could look at these and say, step by step, this is what would it be, pictures and those types of things, you know, would be engaged. How do you go about this? And also the Conservation District providing technical resources to make that happen. Alice and I have also sat down and thought about putting together a community project, basically a test site, what we call the field trial, where we would actually find a piece of property and create it into what the lakefront should look like. You know, the plants are well diagrammed, kind of a self-guided tour where people walk through and see this is what the plants would look like. This is where they fit the best. This is how it would happen. And also signage that would talk about those things. And so we're trying to engage the community that way as well. And so then it'll come down to the end, right? Where there will be financial resources needed at some time, not only to bring the lake up to standard where we need it, but we need to impress upon the citizens, this is forever. This isn't a one and out. you're not gonna solve the problem in 1 year or 2 years. You're going to meet the standards, but we need to continue to make it better and better and better over time. And that will happen as people begin to see the benefits of doing the things we're talking about, and the result of that, where the lake is clean and sustained into the future. So you talked about timelines. The first public meeting I spoke at there at the city hall, we had all the people there. I said, we're looking at 20 years, you know, to really get up to the point that it's on autopilot, that everything is working, all the systems are working together. The people know what their role is, where the monitoring is in place, which we're also planning on having, you know, electronic monitoring systems, real-time data. All those things come into place over time. So that will take some resources, you know, and we can only go so far with grants. At some point in time, if we can demonstrate that we're effective, we brought your lake back, and we need to maintain it over time. What's it cost to do that? And how do we put those resources together?
Great. Allison, anything?
Sure. I think also in the interim, what we have learned through our outreach processes is that we have many, many citizens who are very, very concerned and interested and want to know what they can do as well. And so we have also talked with the Conservation District and Herald about doing a resource fair that would not only talk about water efficiency and water reuse and the right types of plants to plant, but have a place where people can come and get information about lake health and the work that is being done. So something in the offing. We can offer the avenue right here at the Civic Center. It's a beautiful facility, or other places, but I just think we want to help educate the community as best as we can so that everybody knows they have a role that they can play.
Great.
Could I add one more thing to this? And
Sure.
it also deals with citizens and understanding of the aquifer dynamics. You know, we've got a companion project going on at the Conservation District with the Odessa Aquifer. And that's basically taking about 100 wells off the aquifer and putting them on Columbia River water. And what we're trying to do is save that aquifer for what we call M&I. It's municipal and industrial water. And that's what Allison is talking about, is if we can capitalize on those savings and get people off your wells, because water is a finite resource. Clean water is even a more finite resource. And so protecting your groundwater for your city and industry is super critical. And so Allison, that forward thinking of, you know, why don't we use Columbia River water for our parks and maybe our lawns and our cemeteries and our green areas? That's really forward thinking and something that really has to happen over time. Isn't going to happen overnight, but I think just having a path forward with that is a really good starting point.
Great. Yeah. So I'll ask this next question of both of you. The collective comments from the community survey suggested that a metro area sewer and water district that includes the MLRD, the city of Moses Lake, the port of Moses Lake, and Grant County be formed to address lake water quality. In your opinion, would that help? And if so, what would that look like, and what is needed to make that happen? Allison?
So my understanding prior to my arrival is that there were discussions in this regard. I think for right now, we have so much work that needs to be done just to get the current mechanisms working effectively. That's the first priority. The larger issue of a regional organization is a heavy lift and will take some good economic analysis in regards to how that would function and how it would be funded, et cetera. In the meantime, as city manager, I really want to make sure that our current systems are properly deployed and functioning so that we are protecting the lake right now.
Okay. Harold, anything to add?
Well, maybe a couple things here as we, again, look to the future and some forward thinking, particularly on where we go with knowing that there's going to be an increase in population. Some of that's going to be within the city. Some of it, of course, will be rural. I've begun doing kind of a study of land use within a certain proximity to the lake to find out how much that land has been subdivided into small pieces, 5 acres and below. I was pretty surprised at how much of that is sitting out there without a house in it right now. And when they start thinking about the type of septic systems or municipal systems that go into those, I think we need to be engaged early in that conversation to see where we can capitalize on community activities around that, that everyone doesn't need their own septic tank, and maybe municipal would be the way to go. I know that hasn't been discussed that much, but it's going to come up. So you can't just look at what we're going to deal with today. You got to look to the future and say, if we're going to do these things and more people are coming, there's going to be waste associated with that. And you're going to have to be ready to deal with it, specifically in the country. So we're going to incorporate that into our watershed planning and provide decision makers with accurate technical information so they can make informed decisions on how they move forward with these activities.
Good. Is there anything else before we end either of you would like to share?
I would just like to see, or like to say that it was exciting to have this year. I think the quality of this water this year and the years prior that we've had really helped our community to understand what a great resource it is when you're able to use it. And so this rolling up of our sleeves has already been effective, and we look forward to what's ahead.
Great. Harold?
I've seen in the last 4 years or so that we've been involved just a trajectory that is positive. And this year, was a culmination of some of that work just by opening up communication channels with the decision makers. And so they've got it, in their mind that they can be an effective part of what we're doing and not interrupt their systems that badly. So I thought that was very encouraging, but I also bring with it just a little bit of caution, that as a scientist, I need to replicate things over time. Meaning if I'm collectively small I, if we can bring together and string together 3 or 4 or 5 years of the same type of response, we're really onto something. And I'm encouraged that that's going to happen. But just keep moving forward a day at a time and engaging the right people. And I'm confident that we'll solve this problem into the future.
Great. Thank you both. The lake is a draw for tourism, and it's an important element of our economy and our lifestyle, as well as our quality of life. So it's good for our community to understand the good work that's being done, as well as what still needs to happen, along with the timelines, as this isn't a one solution or a quick fix situation. Thank you, Harold. Thank you, Allison. I appreciate you joining me today to provide this update. Stay tuned for more topics along with the updates over the coming months presented by Moses Lake Lead. If you are interested in becoming involved in helping with solutions or have questions, please add them to the comments in our Facebook page at facebook.com Moses Lake Lead, or email us at moseslakelead@gmail.com. Thank you so much.